Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored with Steve Taplin. Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored, where tech leaders drop the filters and just tell it like it is. I'm your host, Steve Taplin, a serial technology entrepreneur who's launched 30 companies, failed at 20 of those, but scaled 10 of those to success. And I turned that roller coaster of a ride into my book called Fail Hard, Win Big. And this is where I teach people how to turn failure into your biggest competitive advantage and how custom software always played a defining role in every win. Now I'm the CEO of Sonatify Technology. We're a nearshore software engineering team company helping existing engineering teams scale. And today I am joined by Jameel Al-Aziz, who is the CTO at a company called Bastion. Jameel has been a longtime engineer. He's been a leader, a CTO many times over. This is going to be some fun. Jameel, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve.
If you would, take a few minutes and walk our listeners through the journey of your career.
Yeah, great. It's a fun journey. So I actually grew up in a little country called Kuwait where we didn't have computer science as a course, as a thing in my school. So my career, I was very interested in it. So started when I was 12, self-taught myself how to code, a lot of online tutorials, forums, videos, grew that into just an intense passion for building infrastructure, building software. So my kind of high school years was me forcing my school to bring in APCS and other courses. When I left college, I got into my dream school, which was UCLA, or so when I left high school. Actually went in as a biomedical engineer, but very quickly transitioned into CS or actually CSE, so computer science engineering. Through that, ran the Linux users group there, was the president. That's where I met kind of folks from Hulu. Got recruited to Hulu, joined there. And that's really where I think my career took off, because I worked with some of the brightest minds in Los Angeles at the time, some of the brightest engineers. I got immensely great mentorship. And that kind of followed me through my career, where I found this passion for infrastructure, security, backend, platform engineering, finance, kind of that. And yeah, over the years, worked for mostly startups, loved just that journey of that's I guess the stress, if you will say so. Some people think I'm, something wrong with me because I keep going after startups, but yeah,
You did hear my story, right?
So exactly.
So people think there's something wrong with both of us.
Exactly.
Life's too boring to have it be easy.
Exactly. I've always said I can always retire at Google. I always want something fun. I want something exciting, and I just want to be able to build great companies and great teams. And so yeah, that's why I ended up at Bastion.
Fast forward to today, do you think Kuwait has advanced where they're starting to teach that stuff in school?
It's a great question. I've gone back. I actually haven't been back to my high school. I should. I have a few friends that have kids there. I should ask, if my legacy has lasted, because I did bring in APCS, and I'm pretty sure they still have it because from those days. So I think so. I think I've been taught when I've gone back, there's definitely more of a VC entrepreneurship spirit in the region, especially in Dubai. And so you're seeing a lot more excitement around engineering and CS. And I'm really excited that that's the case. And, I hope one day to kind of contribute back.
Awesome. So tell us about your company, Bastion.
Yeah, absolutely. So Bastion is a fun little organization. We started with a custodial wallet product for, if you don't know what that is. So in the Web3 space, wallet is effectively how you interact with the world, the Web3 world. So we started by building a custodial product for enterprises, and then we acquired a trust. And with that trust, we've decided to pursue stablecoin issuance. And particularly, we're focusing on enterprises, so Fortune 100 enterprises. We're focusing on white label stablecoin issuances. And kind of our bread and butter is all things regulatory, security, licensing. And we focus not just on the issuance part, but really the holding and the using as well. So we don't see it as a kind of, we don't see ourselves as a one-trick pony. For us, we want to be a trusted partner throughout the entire life cycle of issuing and running a stablecoin.
Excellent. So you've been CTO there and been at the company a little over 2.5 years. So no doubt that you're qualified and your passion for infrastructure, security, and finance fits in. But how did you get the role? Did you apply online? Did you know somebody?
It's a it's kind of a interesting story because I was previous to this role, I was running the engineering team over at Paradigm Connect. So not the VC Paradigm, but the team behind Paradex, which is kind of a DeFi institutional exchange, really a futures and derivatives exchange. So I was running the team there. Had some personal things going on in my life. Had to kind of leave, but at roughly the same time, Andreessen a recruiter from Andreessen reached out and introduced me to a couple teams. Nothing really that excited me. I had really particular things. I'm very opinionated, so there's certain things, check marks I want to hit. But then out of the blue, they reach out and they're like, "Hey, there's a team actually we think you might like." And at the time, Bastion was 3 people. It was, and so got introduced to the founding team, and we just hit it off. Just was like it was meant to be.
And so that was a recruiter that brought that to you?
Yeah, it was a recruiter that just kind of reached out, and it's odd because I normally don't respond to recruiters, but something about the message they sent, it was like, all right, this sounds interesting. Let's have a chat.
Very cool. And wow, so you were person number 4 at the company, so that's exciting.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it's definitely I think the smallest company I've joined, which is always really exciting. It's been sub 10 for a couple companies, but this was sub 5 is it's exciting.
Well, and you guys have right on your website that you just reached a milestone of 40 million in funding, which is amazing. Yep. So not disclosing anything confidential, it's right on your website, but congratulations on that, to be involved since the beginning. Talk about some current projects you're working on.
Yeah, I mean, so right now, our main focus is the stablecoin issuance project. So that the platform, building everything necessary. So, issuing a stablecoin is not easy. It's actually quite a lot of, it's a big regulatory effort, big licensing effort, big security effort, and a fairly large technological effort, although oddly enough, it's mostly regulatory and security. And for good reason. We have a trust company that's supervised by NYDFS, and as most folks hopefully know, NYDFS is pretty much the strictest standard out there. So yeah, the focus is really getting to a place where we can finally launch our first stablecoin. So we have a customer we're working with. The one thing about that is obviously enterprise sales cycles take some time, but yeah, we're hoping to be ready to launch by the end of the year.
So here's a dumb question. From a technology and engineering perspective, yep. I get it with the regulatory, the securities issues. What does it take from a technology and an engineering perspective to pull off what you guys are doing?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the thing that's very interesting about tech, and especially big tech, right? So when you think about I learned this through my career, working at like other companies that had more consumer facing products, is if you're working for, let's say a Meta or a Google or something, there's a good chance that you're willing to accept 1% error rates, as like, hey, this is normal, it's fine. Yeah, if 1% of our users are affected, big whoop, right? When you're building stablecoin issuance, that is not acceptable, right? $1 missing is not acceptable. A cent missing is not acceptable. Everything needs to be accounted for. Everything needs to work reliably. Everything needs to be backed 1-for-1. You need to be able to prove everything is backed at least 1-for-1. You need to prove that your systems are working correctly. You need to prove that every bit of cryptography and every bit of security is functioning correctly and cannot be circumvented. And so it's a lot of rigor. It's a lot of building robust systems in a way that I think most engineers today don't think about or aren't trained to think about. And so that brings a challenge. It's a you need a lot of testing, a lot of stuff that people just sometimes don't find exciting or don't find sexy, but there are things that we have to think about.
No margin for error. So more rigorous processes, procedures, security. No, well put. Tell us about your engineering team. How many engineers you have, the work model you guys do?
Yeah, so we're just under 15. We're hiring actually pretty rapidly right now. I've modeled the engineering team after the things that I enjoyed in my career, and that was always just ownership. I think a fun story I like to tell here goes back to my very first job out of school, Hulu, where I had to set up a load balancer. At the time, this is before the cloud, right? AWS was still very, very small, so we had physical machines and physical load balancers. And I was building a service, was launching my first service, and the DevOps team, I reached out to the DevOps team asking them like, hey, can you give me a VIP, so virtual IP, so that I can basically register my service? And what they sent to me was root SSH credentials to our load balancer. And that meant that I had the power to take down
To
Hulu
take everything down.
exactly. And that was exciting, but that I kind of that old adage of great power, great power comes great responsibility. That kind of stuck with me, and they're stuck with me, sorry, throughout my career. And I wanted to make sure I built a team that I could be enabled by that. So one thing I think about
So your team can take down Google?
not Google, but they could take down Bastion. But not obviously not quite as not quite the same because we are a regulated entity. We do have to have certain least privilege access and certain procedures. But we empower our engineers to really own as much as they can. So nobody really, the goal is nobody should stand in. If you really care about something and you really want to fix something, you should be able to do it, and we should have a way for you to do that.
And are you guys a remote team? Where are your engineers located?
Yeah, we are a remote team, although most of our team we have our New York headquarters where we have our office. So most of our team is East Coast based, not necessarily all in New York, but East Coast based.
But you're in LA, right?
I am in LA. That is correct. I'm in New York quite often, as you can imagine, which is fun. And then we have some folks in EU, and we actually just hired somebody in New Zealand, talking to some folks in Australia. We have some folks in Brazil, so we're pretty distributed.
How do you handle time zone differences on your team in that distributed model?
Just don't sleep. No, kidding.
Well, that's one option.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of it is being upfront about expectations, right? And so since most of the team is in New York, whenever we hire somebody, we do make sure that we communicate, hey, expectation is that you should be aligned to East Coast hours as much as possible. I mean, we're not fanatical about it, but we definitely try to make sure we're really open and honest up front about that. Like, hey, that's the expectation. Being on the West Coast, I can support, and I can work with folks more in Asia and like APAC time zones. That aligns decently well. EU aligns decently well with Europe. I think one thing, we built a very similar team at Paradigm where things were distributed. And one lesson I learned from there, and that I've taken to Bastion, is a distributed team can function if you align what people are working on to the time zones that they're working. So, one thing we think a lot about is like who's working on what projects and what are they blocked on, and how do we make sure that they're aligned with their hours are aligned with the teams that can enable them. And that's something I didn't do at Paradigm, and I think something that I did hurt because I was not sleeping at all. Now, thankfully, I do get some sleep, but yeah, it's really just a matter of organizational, like just thinking through who works best with who and what are they working on, and just making sure that there's some overlap.
Gotcha. So I know that security infrastructure is something you're passionate about. Before the show, you made a comment on practical and meaningful security versus security theater. Expand on that.
Absolutely. So I think this is something I think that plagues the technology, the industry. I think we've seen actually, I'm not going to name names, but there's been vendors that have gotten acquired for billions of dollars that I've tested, and I've tested by running them on our systems and running penetration tests and not getting any alerts. I think the security industry today is very, they're very focused on defense and posture, right? So you'll see this in a lot of vendors out there where they talk a lot about posture management, or they talk about, basically just locking things down. The reality, though, is most attacks occur because of human mistakes, right? Most attacks, I think phishing is the number one way that attacks happen. And so the reality is like you can have all the defenses in the world, but if somebody gets access to your internal systems through an employee, how do you know that that's occurring? How do you know what the attacker did, how they got in? And I feel like the industry does not really focus on that. At least the commercial industry. When you look at NYDFS Part 500 and you look at SOC 2, there are concerns about those controls, mainly around logging. But that's one thing I think a lot about is I don't assume that I can put up all the defenses in the world to prevent people from getting into my system. I assume that somebody will eventually get into my system. How do I limit the blast radius, and how do I know what they did?
Okay.
Because to me, the most important thing is like, I need to know what they did. Because if I don't know, I can always assume. I think one of my favorite questions, that we get asked is, has there been any security incidents in the last year? And I always find that question really interesting, because my belief is most people have had incidents, just they have no idea that they've had incidents. And
Or
I think we've seen that.
they don't want to report it.
Or they don't report it. Exactly. Yeah. But, I've been part of other companies where I'm fairly confident, like, we would have had no idea if somebody was in the system,
So your practical advice as an expert in this space is, look, you can't stop human error. So people are going to get in. So you have to focus on knowing that someone was there, what they had access to, and making sure it's limited.
Exactly. Absolutely.
That is some awesome uncensored advice right there. I like it. I like it a lot. Where do you see the adoption of crypto, including stable coins, evolving over the next 5 to 10 years?
That's a great question. The funny thing about that question is, if you asked me that question a month ago, a year ago, I would have given you different answers at every
Because it's
checkpoint.
evolving off. It's kind of like AI, right? It's evolving quickly.
Exactly. I like to think I'm a great coder and a great engineer, but I definitely cannot tell the future. So what I will say is, or what I do believe in is, what we are seeing today, which is we're seeing stablecoins, in particular stablecoins, being used for bridging the gap between traditional finance and the technology benefits that come with crypto, right? I think prior to stablecoins, a lot of the use cases for crypto were very speculative, and therefore very, it was, I think, hard to judge where the actual utility was. But stablecoins, it's become very clear that what the utility is. And the utility is, 24-hour settlements, cross-border settlements, things that are problems in the financial industry today. And so I think what we're going to start to see is more and more companies move their treasury management over to stablecoins. I think we're going to see more countries adopt stablecoins or digital currencies as legal tender potentially. And I think that, we're going to start seeing more of a global economy, which is what I think we all have been wanting for decades now.
Yeah. So that is interesting how I guess I never thought about relative to that space, as I don't live and breathe that every day, that it's changing as rapidly as AI, where you can give a different answer based on the week, the month, the quarter.
Yeah.
So from an AI perspective, throughout the developer life cycle, so there's lots of benefits. There's also downsides.
Yep.
What have you seen the problems that remain with using AI through the engineering process, and talk about specifically how it relates to your core areas of security and compliance?
Absolutely. So, I was talking to a good friend of mine about this, and, very bullish on AI. So am I. And I spent a lot of time thinking about what's kind of the crux of the issue that I have with AI, and how it relates to security and just everything that's happening. And I think it really comes down to attribution, which is, today AI operates with your credentials. It operates as you, as the developer, right? And the problem with that is, you start to enter this world of like, okay, I don't know if I put up a PR, if I put up a PR on GitHub. It's very difficult today to know what parts of that were written by AI and what parts of that were actually written by me. And as a result, it's more, it's difficult to apply certain automated rules as a result of that. Because, for example, like, AI is great at pattern matching, and that's fantastic. But there's also, another thing I always like to say is, there's a lot of bad code out there. And AI is trained on a lot of bad code. And so how do you know, if it's pattern matching on bad code, it's going to repeat those patterns. And so how do you, if I want to have extra eyes on on those patterns, how do I make that happen, right? And as it relates to like security, there's some really interesting things that we're seeing, right? We're seeing a lot of kind of two sides of this coin, which is we are seeing a lot of vulnerabilities introduced by AI generated code, primarily because engineers aren't taking the time to really think through what is being produced and read through and understand what is being produced. But we're seeing the opposite too, which is that AI is helping with security. We're seeing AI, for example, one of our vendors, they have AI helping us root cause incidents and and dig through the noise that is all the logs and all the metrics and all the data you collect. And so, the way I see it is it's great for a lot of things. I think in terms of helping humans, it's fantastic. In terms of, because like one thing we're talking about too, as it relates to our industry, is compliance is a big part of our industry. And traditionally, building a compliance team means hiring tens or hundreds of people potentially offshore to do filter alerts, especially KYC type alerts or sanctions alerts. And now a lot of that can be automated through AI. So there's a lot of cost savings that potentially can, at least at first pass. But as it relates to engineering, I think, the biggest problem right now is attribution. Is how do I know something is AI versus not AI? Because that to me is where, I want to make sure that I understand what my engineers are producing, what machines are producing, and how do I validate each one differently.
So I could easily vibe code a new stablecoin platform and be a competitor of yours tomorrow and get my credentials from all the regulatory bodies, right?
Definitely not. I mean, I we I can tell you that we have some of the best, you know, folks on the compliance side that I've ever worked with, and some of the best lawyers. And
Wait, wait, you're
I
a
would
tech
never.
guy. You're supposed to hate those people.
You would think so, but given the fact that I'm not writing the policies and they are, I love them because I review those policies. I've written a lot of security policies myself, and I can tell you it is a thankless job, but it is a job that's much that is needed. Yeah, I will say licensing is tough. Licensing is very, very tough. There's a lot of requirements. One of my jobs here at Bastion is building reports for our compliance, kind of our compliance needs, and it's difficult. I'm not gonna lie. And so yeah, I don't think it's for the faint of heart. It's a lot of procedural work, but it's needed. I think the industry needs to rebuild trust with the world, and that's what we've tried to build here at Bastion.
So I think I already know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyways. As a tech leader here in Q4 2025, what are some of the biggest challenges you're facing? And I'm pretty sure you just hit that, but thought I
Yeah,
would ask it again anyways.
yeah. I mean, well, first hiring. I mean, hiring. We're a growing company. We need to hire. I think finding the best talent is difficult. Convincing them to join crypto is improving, thankfully, due to kind of the Genius Act and more regulatory posture that's like solidifying. But it's still difficult, especially now with the boom of AI. I think AI is pretty exciting to most engineers. So trying to convince them to join us is
AI also makes it harder to filter engineers through the hiring process because they're
100%.
all customizing everything to the job post.
So
And so it takes some more human intervention there to figure out who's real, who's not.
not only that, I mean, well, it's funny you say that because now there's also AI for screening, right? So a lot of the interviewing, and we're exploring some platforms there, and it's a challenge, right? Because you want to find that balance of like the human element of a job, but also the number element of hiring, which is a volume game, to be honest. So yeah,
I
it's
know, I
difficult.
know I have clients that when they're doing panel interviews of engineers, they have one person in the room typing everything they're asking into ChatGPT to see if they're just reciting the same things.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. So we haven't done that, but one of the things that I always find hilarious now about feedback that I review is there's not more than ever, there's been this question of, I think this person cheated. I think this person. And so we're starting to grapple with, is it cheating? Because AI is becoming increasingly part of everybody's job. So is it cheating that you used AI to answer an interview question?
And
Don't have a good
you're a
answer there.
senior engineering leader. Would you want to hire an engineer who didn't know how to use AI?
It's a good question. No, I think whoever I hire, I mean, AI to me is a tool, right? Just like the blockchain is a
Uh-huh.
tool, just like I believe, I think one of the biggest fallacies in engineering is this idea that there are back-end engineers versus front-end engineers versus data engineers. To me, the best engineers are engineers outright, right? You can do anything. You use the tools that are available to you and you can gain knowledge. If you came to me and said I only work in Java, I'd be like, you're not an engineer, right? Because Java is just a tool. So AI to me is a tool. You should know how to use the tools that are available to you. I think the question is, do you know how to do your job with that tool as a tool or as the only tool?
Yep, that's a good way of putting it.
And that's where I would draw the line, I would say.
So, Jameel, what are some brutal lessons you've learned on your journey through many companies, through many engineering teams?
The lesson I'll tell you is one that got me to where I am today, which is, kind of CTO. And that is, first, the reality is you can be the best technologist in the world. You can be the best coder in the world. You could build the most sophisticated algorithm in the world. If nobody's using your software, it doesn't matter, right? I think what a lot of engineering teams fail at is forgetting the fact that your duty is to your customer, not to yourself and not to your team. And so I've been part of many engineering discussions where we were talking more about how to make things easier on us than we were talking about making things easier on our customers. And I always felt that was wrong. And so one lesson I learned is don't do that.
And
Focus on the
that's an
customer.
expensive lesson. I mean,
It is.
most SaaS or tech companies fail when they lose sight of the client and their needs, because it is, to your point, it is easy to get wrapped up and obsessed with creating the best code and algorithms. But to your point, if no one uses it, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter, right? And yeah, so that's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is, a lot of the procedural stuff that we do as engineers, or we're asked to do as engineers, and that we hate doing, like creating Jira tickets or writing up a Jira ticket, or like creating a design doc, or all that, or even just writing good commit messages. Those may seem like wastes of time, but the reality is in order for you to grow in your career, you need to empower others. And the only way you can empower others is by sharing context. And what most engineers need to understand is context is everything in our field. Something I always like to do is I have a very, very strict commit standards that everybody has to read when they join Bastion. And I always love to tell the engineers, I'm like, look, you're gonna read this, you're gonna hate me when you read this, but in a year from now, you're gonna come and you're gonna thank me. And it almost always happens where a year later, somebody's like, you know what? I get blamed. I was like, who's the idiot that wrote this? It turns out it was me. And because you forced me to write good commit messages, I understood why I wrote that. And yeah, so, I think that those are the two lessons. It's like, don't build for yourself, build for a team, and then build for your customers foremost.
I love it. Jameel, thank you for getting uncensored with us today. Sounds like you've had a fun journey through the fintech space, and I love your passion around security, compliance, and your story on security theater and the reality of it hits home hard. Before we wrap, Jameel, what's some no BS advice you have for today's tech leaders who are trying to build, scale, or even just survive?
Well, that's a great question. I would say things don't let problems and don't let stress and don't let the noise get in the way. The reality is tomorrow's another day. Just focus on what's right in front of you. Don't let, I think a lot of engineers, a lot of tech leaders stress about a lot of things that they can't control. And so I always like to tell even my fellow leaders here at Bastion, like, let's just stay focused on what's right in front of us, the things that we can control.
Awesome.
That's the only thing that matters.
Great advice. Jameel, thanks again. That's it for this episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. I'm Steve Taplin. If you enjoyed the show, go ahead and hit subscribe. If you didn't enjoy it, did you hear about Jameel's mad security skills? Well, we'll make sure your competitors see this if you didn't like it. It might be the edge they're looking for. Remember to fail hard, win big, and always build what matters. See you next time. That's a wrap. Another great episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. Thank you guys so much for listening. I really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun doing this show. I love talking with great tech leaders. As a side note, if you're interested, check out my new book, Fail Hard, Win Big. This is the story of how I built 30 companies, failed on 20, and turned 10 into multi-million-dollar wins. The common thread with all of them was custom software. Also, if you need software development help out there, my company, Sonatify Technology, we deliver world-class software development engineers out of Latin America. We have a solid track record of helping companies launch better products and faster. Thanks again for listening. Appreciate it and appreciate you.